All right. Good morning. Welcome to the 2020 Jefferson Lab Organization annual meeting. I'm Kent Paschke. Thanks for joining us this morning. There are a number of ways to communicate and to let me know that you can hear me. If somebody could type in event chat that you can hear me, I would be much appreciative. Have you found the event chat on your interface? All right. Thanks, Ed, for signing up with that. So you have the ability to chat. That's an event-wide chat. Everybody can see it, except the presenter, who, when they are presenting, will see only their own slides. You are familiar with a lot of the features of BlueJeans, I think many of you, so I think we are comfortable using this. But this is different software, and so we are expecting to have a couple of minor technical glitches along the way today. So I hope you can be patient with us as we work through using this new interface for large meetings. If you have questions during a session, I ask that you type them into the Q&A. That's a text interface that will allow us to queue up questions, and if you are interested in particular questions on that, you can like them, which sort of votes them up in the queue. And so that way we can address those questions to the speaker at the end of the presentation. And as I mentioned in the email that was sent around to individually and also to Google List today, if you there is a method for live interaction with the speaker. It's somewhat more complicated, but for that you would raise your hand, and then perhaps the moderator will be able to chat with you in a one-on-one chat to arrange for that conversation. Okay, so with nothing else along, this morning we're going to get a brief welcome from Will Brooks, and then we'll hear from Stuart telling us about the lab, and from Tim Hallman, who will let us know about the DOE perspective on how things are going. So, Will, are you ready to take it away here? Will, are you still around? I'm not hearing you.
Yes. Hi, good morning. At least for me, there's some kind of echo, so I was waiting for the echo to finish. Welcome to the meeting. Okay, can you hear me now?
Sound great.
Yes.
Okay, some kind of delay here and there. So, welcoming you to the meeting. Thank you, Kent, for the introduction. And I will be brief so we can get ahead on the schedule. So the Jefferson Lab user community has almost 1,700 active users, where active is defined on the bottom of this page. And we now have something like 476 physics letters, physical review letters, and 1,700 in other referee journals as of the end of last year, so more by now. 658 PhDs granted and 195 more in progress. And in fact, I think that's even underreported. And then we have more than 182,000 citations for work done at JLab. So a very active community, very international. And so the user community is growing. This is a graph of the number of users by the previous definition. And all sectors have been growing, but especially foreign users and US university users, for a growth of 30% over the last year. So I'd like to mention the purposes of the JLUO. It's to encourage, promote, and assist user scientists and engineers in their career trajectories. These are from basically the charter of the institution. We try to create effective communication channels, including new ones when they're needed, with the lab and with other entities. We are developing effective methods for giving feedback to the JLab management. We promote advancement of basic scientific knowledge in our field, and we promote having a positive impact on society. So those are the basic purposes of our organization overall. So this is the board of directors for the year 2019 to 2020. If you have any concerns at any time, you should let these people know in their particular area of expertise. 5 of them are going to be rotating out in a day or two, and the new members will be announced at the business meeting today. And if you want to contact any of these people, there's contact information linked at the bottom of the page. Finally, this is the 2020 annual users meeting with the theme of the celebration of JLab at 12 GeV. So you will see fresh results in all sessions related to the new data that's being taken. A novel, important feature is we will have a virtual poster session. This is going to be quite interesting. It will be great. We have a record number of presenters this time. It's tomorrow from 2:30 to 4:30. The EIC software tutorial will be during the lunch break on Wednesday, so don't miss that. It'll be very interesting. And after the meeting is over at 3:20 on Wednesday, there will be more on EIC software. There will be a simulation question and answer session, so don't miss that. So the organizers have provided a Slack channel for communication during the meeting. So if you don't want to be left out, you should join this Slack channel. It will in particular be used for communication during the virtual poster session, and it will also be used in general for communication during the meeting. So I'd like to highlight and thank the organizing committee, which is the 5 people on the bottom left of the slide, and important contributors on the bottom right of the slide. So Kent, Lorelei, Susan, Ed, and Amy did a tremendous job of organizing the meeting. We thank them very much, and we will now enjoy the results. So with that, I will close. If there are any questions, you can ask them, and I will try to respond. Otherwise, we can go forward with Stuart's talk.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Will. As you say, thanks for keeping us on time. So I do encourage you to follow up on that link to the Slack channel. If you haven't used Slack before, it's a pretty, mostly pretty intuitive interface. I think that you might appreciate it. A lot of us are using it for work on that workspace, communicating with other users at JLab. But then that specific channel will be handy to chat about the meeting, but specifically it'll be the virtual space where we can celebrate the posters together on Tuesday afternoon. So we'll move on and we'll hear from the lab director, Stuart Henderson. Now, lots been happening since I've seen a public talk from Stuart, so I'm looking forward to hearing about how things are going and what the outlook is. Again, I encourage you to send questions through that Q&A. We've tried to leave a lot of time open for discussions, and so hopefully we can get some conversation going. So Stuart, I see your slide. Hopefully this works out for you. And We've had a couple problems trying to get the slides to present properly, but let's hope this works. So take it away, sir.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Ken, can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can.
Good, great. Okay, looks like we got the presentation issue solved, so that's wonderful. So welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to welcome you virtually. Obviously, we wish we were able to carry this out in person and look forward to next year's in-person meeting. As Ken said, there is a lot of news from Jefferson Lab. So I've tried to sort of summarize some of the news and highlights here on one slide, and I'll walk through a number of these topics through the rest of this presentation. So the theme of this meeting, 12JEV and its results. So the scientific era of 12JEV is very much in full swing. Been a number of high-profile experiments and complete experimental programs that have been completed, and results starting to emerge now, which is great to see. In 2019, fiscal 19, we completed our second full year of CBAF operations. We delivered about 32 weeks, which was the most weeks of CBAF running since 2010. So that was it was really a productive year and a great year. Reliability was right around 81%. Another important theme in CBAF operations is our reliability and gradient program that's been underway now for several years. We did encounter a number of challenges in achieving top energy due to gradient limitations. So there's a lot of work going on, and you'll hear some of that featured in other talks about our plans for increasing the gradient in the Linacs and therefore the top energy available from CBAF. EIC project planning, there's been a tremendous amount of evolution, and great news that Critical Decision Zero was approved and the project is moving forward. And we are working very closely in partnership with Brookhaven to make that happen. So I'll say a lot more about that a little later. On the Muller project, we're moving towards Critical Decision 1. There's a Office of Project Assessment review coming up in September for Muller, so very happy about that. We hired a project manager for Muller, Jim Fast, who joined Jefferson Lab about 6 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. He comes from Pacific Northwest National Lab, has a lot of really great experience, so we're very happy about that. The solid proposal we submitted to the Office of Nuclear Physics early in this calendar year. We stood up a new Computational Sciences and Technology division. I'll say a little more about that later, and there are a number of advanced computing initiatives underway. We do a lot of work and continue to for other projects within the DOE Office of Science, and those projects principally involving cryomodule construction or cryogenics are moving along, although not without their challenges with COVID-19. We've added staff. We have attracted new staff that has really added depth and leadership in a number of areas. You'll hear from some, I think, during this meeting. I mentioned, one previously, Jim Fast, and there are others as well. And I think the division heads will point out some of those critical hires that are really making a difference here at the lab. We launched an enhanced fellows program. This has been really good to see. The lab has had a fellows program named in honor of Nathan Isger for quite some time, and it started out as a theory fellows program, and then we pulled in experimental physics. We made the decision over the last year to be able to support one fellow in theory, one in experimental nuclear physics, and one in accelerator science and technology in honor of the founding director of the lab, Herman Grunder. We made a commitment to support one each of those at all times. So this is no longer in the case of the ISGR, going to have to toggle between theory and experimental nuclear physics. There will be one at any given time, and likewise an accelerator focused fellow as well. So we're happy about that. We're excited about that. There's a lot to say about both safety and our inclusion and diversity initiatives that I will mention here in just a second. It's great to be able to highlight both staff and users who continue to be recognized for their accomplishments. I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but great to see some of these big ones here. Volker Burkert, for instance, winning Virginia's Outstanding Scientist in 2019. That was a great event that several of us were privileged to attend up in Richmond for that ceremony. It was very exciting. Justin Stevens won a very prestigious Presidential Early Career Award. That was fantastic. A number of you, including our organizer for this meeting, Kent Paschke, received fellowship status in the American Physical Society. That's great. And we're always happy about the Office of Science Early Career Award winners. Great to see that. Let me say a few words about safety. You probably recall from last year's meeting that at that time we had experienced a number of near misses that were extremely concerning. An electrical near miss in which, near fatality, I should say. It was not a near miss. It could have been a whole lot worse. An employee, an engineer, received a very significant electrical shock. A near miss in laser safety, and another more minor electrical shock. This goes back a year ago, all between sort of April and June of 2019. So that was a real wake-up call for us. We had already been putting a lot of effort into an initiative that goes by the name of human performance. That's a really powerful way to influence the safety culture and operations culture in large organizations, and have continued to put a lot of effort into that. Our notable events, whether you measure near misses or reportable events or events with injuries, you can see the trends. There have been a significant number over the last several years and declining. The concerning thing, of course, is that these near misses we're having have been pretty significant. So we put a lot of effort into that. We're revamping our electrical safety program. There are a number of changes in qualifications, training, hazard identification, work control and planning, and so on, that many of which have already been rolled out, but a number of which are forthcoming. So my message to you is really just along sort of the basics in human performance, which is to have a questioning attitude, try not to make assumptions, ask yourself what can go wrong. Often what can go wrong, unfortunately, sometimes will in fact go wrong. A lot of the issues we encountered as a lab were related to situational awareness. By that, I mean, what's going on in my immediate area? How have conditions changed? What's different on a Monday morning when I last left this area on, Friday evening or Saturday morning? And obviously, if you have any concerns, by all means, please let them be known. In particular, as always, keep an eye out for our students who are here over the summer or throughout the year. And please continue to make sure they're properly trained, properly supervised. Diversity and inclusion has been an enormous topic of the last year, and increasingly so given recent events. We did a number of things earlier this year. We rolled out a diversity and inclusion culture survey. One of the challenges in a topic like this is knowing your starting point, knowing where we are as a lab, where we are as the larger lab, incorporating the user community. So we put a lot of effort into this into this survey to try and get at a snapshot of where we are from the point of view of the culture at the lab, and put a lot of effort into getting good participation. So we got 70% of lab employee participation, which is fantastic, almost unheard of for a survey. So that was great to see. That should give us a really good sort of benchmark on where we are with participation rates that large. And 18% of our user community responded as well. So we really wanted that as well. We wanted to get, the data that reflected significant numbers, both from employees and our users, and we've gotten that. We also collected an enormous number of comments, more than 1,000 comments. That's wonderful. The results are in, but we as lab leadership have not yet seen the results. We were slated to spend a significant amount of time with the third-party vendor who carried out this survey, and then coronavirus hit, so we've had to reschedule that and have a meeting coming up in the next couple of weeks. We intend to, so we'll get our briefing. We will share those results both with the lab staff and user community. Stephen Awaje joined the lab as our diversity and inclusion program lead. So this is great to see and great timing. We spent quite some time trying to find a very capable D&I lead, and we're very successful in recruiting Stephen from Shell Oil. So we're really thrilled about that. He's beginning to plug in. Of course, he, like most people, are working remotely. Very much looking forward to his on-site presence together with the whole lab's on-site presence to really make a lot of progress in this important topic. We rolled out a new mandatory course in building a respectful workplace in a technical environment. The focus for this course is on harassment, it's on bullying, constructive communications, and creating a psychologically safe work environment, a topic very important and of increasing importance. We launched Safe Zone Ally training. That's facilitated by D&I Council members, so that's great to see. Safe Zone training and the safe zone concept we recognize is widely promulgated in academic environments, so we were excited to bring that to the laboratory. The recent events around the horrific death of George Floyd prompted action and prompted communication, which hopefully you all saw the message of unity that I sent out that outlines some of the concrete steps and commitments that we are taking as a lab. That are some of which are already underway, others are areas, and we'll be renewing the focus and attention on certain particular aspects of D&I at the lab. And again, this culture survey, I think, is really going to go a long way toward helping us better understand that baseline of where we are. We put a lot of effort and, in fact, have ramped up efforts in education and outreach in our K through 12 STEM events. We've increased our activities and engagement with the Newport News school system. We joined forces with Christopher Newport University's so-called Captains Program, which is a pretty neat program to get Newport News high school students already involved at the college level. So we've been very eager and happy to partner with CNU on that activity, and strengthened partnerships in a number of other areas. Our participation in the Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day, another example of that increasing engagement in this important topic. Here's the Jefferson Lab Organization. I'm going to highlight in these red boxes changes in the last year. Let me start at the bottom. So Mary Logue, many of you may know, our former ES&H director, retired. We were thrilled to be able to recruit Stephen Hoey to take up that position of leadership in ES&H. He comes with a lot of experience, including significant experience from Brookhaven National Lab. On the right, we pulled out of ES&H a subgroup that encompasses quality and laboratory performance assurance under the leadership of Steve Smith. So the point of this box is to have a higher level view of performance across the lab, which is important for us. We stood up a new division called Computational Science and Technology under the leadership of Amber Bainline. Amber is now the newest associate director of Jefferson Lab, and that organization sits at the same level as experimental physics accelerator, theory, and engineering. And I will say a little bit more about that later, but the point being that it both recognizes where we are now and points to the future opportunities in computational sciences and technology. Finally, and I'll say much more about this a little later, on the electron-ion collider front, we stood up the Jefferson Lab EIC organization under the leadership of Allison Long. So our vision for Jefferson Lab, you've seen this before. We really think about the vision in terms of 3 science and technology thrusts. The first one being really enabling you all, our community, to deliver discovery science based on CBAF, based on our user facility. So, you can distill all that into, the highest priority continues to be delivering on the 12-JEV scientific program. The second thrust at the lab is supporting the long-term vision for the field, and of course that's articulated in the field's long-range plan, and we plug in a number of areas. We plug in, of course, an electron-ion collider moving forward. Again, say more about that shortly, as well as some of the other initiatives that are really forward-looking for our field, artificial intelligence, quantum information sciences, and so on. Thirdly, we serve a stewardship mission for particular technologies, namely large-scale cryogenics, superconducting radio frequency accelerator systems that support nuclear physics, obviously through CBAF, and the work we've done for FRIB, but also the larger mission within the Department of Energy. So you can think of that in terms of the construction projects that we carry out for other labs and other programs. Finally, we continue to put a lot of effort into operating the laboratory, operating it efficiently and safely. Will already showed this, the user community growth. It's great to see this growth and to see it continuing to grow as the 12-JEV program matures and evolves. So that's wonderful to see. And I've mentioned this at every meeting, that our highest priority, certainly since I came on board 3 years ago, has been to increase the weeks of operation at CBAF to support the experimental program. And this has been a real success story, thanks to the tremendous support from the Office of Nuclear Physics for making this happen through the budget process and through their stalwart support of the program. So you can see in FY19, we set a goal for ourselves that we met of 32 weeks of operation. Our goal in the out years after the long shutdown that we will be starting later this year is to try to reach steady state operation at the optimal level of 34 weeks per year. Now, I have to say we are adjusting this slide, which I believe is identical to the slide I showed last year, and this is all playing out as we speak due to COVID-19. We are planning on resuming operations, in fact, in the next month or so, to make up for the lost time that was in the CBAF run that was interrupted due to the COVID-19 and our transition into shutting down. I'll say more about that in a moment, and that has ripple effects going out at least over the next year. So speaking of COVID-19, let me give a quick recap of how this played out at the laboratory. We transitioned to minimum safe operations on March 23rd, which in our local lingo meant medical condition 6. That's the highest level, which means essentially terminating all on-site operations. So we had 6 weeks left in the CBAF run at that point. We maintained safe operation of the site and of the equipment on the site with, depending on the day and what was going on, sort of a minimum of 20 staff members, a maximum of 50 on site, and all others working remotely. This was an enormous challenge that I think we handled very well, of almost, not quite on a dime, but almost on a dime, transitioning the 700-ish staff members at Jefferson Lab to off-site remote operation, where about 80% of staff members were able to work productively remotely, and another approximately 20%, who are critical for the on-site hands-on work here at the lab, also were sent home to work remotely as they were able. Throughout that whole time period, we prepared plans, prepared the site, the buildings, processes, training, and so on for eventual resumption of on-site operations. And in fact, we just started that phase, relaxing from MedCon 6 back to MedCon 5 about 2 weeks ago at this point, following extensive discussions with the Department of Energy and approval by the DOE. So that decision and that process was made after a lot of discussion with the department, and the department, of course, took a complex-wide approach toward authorizing resumption of on-site operations across the lab complex. So our plan called for about 200 staff members on site, and we're hitting numbers that are very close to that now after 2 weeks, together with limited sort of case-by-case user access, particularly as we try to get systems turned back on. Users will be able to access the site in MedCon 4, so when we go down to the next level, and that is subject to new user access requirements that have been communicated, so please be sure to take a look at those. Our plan is to resume the CBAF run to complete the FY20 program. Again, we have about 6 weeks remaining, and then proceed to the long scheduled accelerator down, which had been on the books. We were intending to go into that long down period, I think, in the second week of May, according to the original schedule. So we will now go into that program likely in September and carry out that long scheduled accelerator down, which the duration of which is set by the replacement of our original equipment, 2 Kelvin cold box, with a brand new 2K cold box, which retires probably the highest risk to CBAF operations at Jefferson Lab. As a lab, we had no staff with confirmed COVID-19. We had 2 staff members who were presumed positive, and that goes back to the February and early March timeframe. Okay, let me say a few words about electron-ion collider at this point. So DD0 was approved in December. Tremendous news for our field, a long time coming, 2 decades in the making, depending on when you start counting. You probably are aware there was an external panel that was formed over the summer and evaluated proposals from both Jefferson Lab and Brookhaven National Lab over the August to October timeframe, culminating in an in-person meeting with this panel in, I think, the second week of October or so. The department announced the selection of Brookhaven National Lab to host the EIC in early January of 2020. And we immediately at that point began the process of pivoting from the J-like effort and activities that Jefferson Lab had been pursuing toward partnership with Brookhaven, based on a mutual shared commitment for the success of the electron-ion collider and the importance of this facility for our field. We had a very I think in retrospect, extremely important meeting about 2 weeks after that announcement, in which both Tim Hallman, representing Office of Nuclear Physics, and Steve Binkley, representing Office of Science, together with Dune Gibbs, the director of Brookhaven, came to Jefferson Lab. We had a town hall and Q&A session that I think was extremely important. It really set the tone not only of partnership, but expectations from the department on how they would like to see this partnership go and the importance of it in terms of the benefit for both the laboratories and also critically the nuclear science user community. So this message was repeated again at the NSAC meeting about 6 weeks later, and I recount here some words on slides from both Tim Hallman and Steve Binkley, and Tim made the point that the project expectation from Office of Science is that the project will be carried out as a full intellectual partnership between Brookhaven and Jefferson Lab, as well as other collaborators with major participation by all. So that's a really important statement. Steve Binkley also pointed out that the Office of Science is looking to strengthen smaller and single-purpose laboratories to be more multidisciplined, which also has implications for Jefferson Lab. We are one of those set of smaller single-purpose laboratories that he's referring to there. So we took action straight away. We had our first in-person, face-to-face meeting of the two laboratory management teams at Brookhaven on February 10th. You can see a picture of that there. We followed that up 2 weeks later with another face-to-face meeting at Jefferson Lab in late February. We followed that up with a third face-to-face meeting together with the Office of Nuclear Physics in Germantown. I don't have a photo of that. That was about 2 weeks later and was right before DC really shut down and before we all started initiating our pandemic plan. So that was the last time we were able to get together face to face. So since that time, there's been very positive and constructive engagement together with Brookhaven. We formalized our joint commitment in a written partnering agreement that was signed by myself and Dune Gibbs in early May that sort of sets the foundation for this partnership. And there's been very intense work since probably mid-April, I would say, in forging this partnership in detail, getting to the level of discussion of specific scope and responsibilities, and those complicated issues are all under discussion now and all getting worked out as we speak. To that end, the integrated Brookhaven Jefferson Lab team is being developed, and I mentioned we stood up our internal organization under the leadership of Allison Long. So what does all this mean for the future of Jefferson Lab and the future of CBAF? Speaking to CBAF specifically, CBAF has a long program ahead of it, and that program, even in the era of an EIC, is complementary in many respects because CBAF really will remain the prime facility for fixed target, high luminosity, even very high luminosity electron scattering with a special role in the high X region. This table is one of several types of tables we tend to show that lays out the approved experimental program by hall and topic. And you can see in green the total approved run group days, which in this rack up we've included approved solid experiments, solid running. And you can see the total days required for that program that's on the books. So in a full year of running, we can knock off about 100 run group days, in a given year. So you see numbers like 1295 and 1026 and halls A and B, and more's coming all the time, and C and D. So this is a decade program that we're looking at. That includes two significant experimental system projects, Muller and Solid, as I mentioned. And there are also letters of intent and proposals that have been received for a polarized positron program, not included in this table, a K-long program in Hall D, double deeply virtual Compton scattering program, and so on. So there's more and, more significant programs coming along all the time. So it's possible that some of these may, in fact, even motivate further enhancements of CBAF and its capabilities. Bob is going to say more about molar and solid, so let me save on a little time by sort of skipping through this, except to say that molar's really moving forward with an OPA review coming up, and thrilled to have attracted and recruited Jim Fast to head up the molar project. Solid passed a very important milestone with the submission of the proposal back early in this calendar year. So finally, I want to quickly sort of summarize kind of how I and we see Jefferson Lab's science and technology directions in the future. So we're really thinking about this in at least 4 pillars. The first is the CBAF-based program. It's a very vibrant program, as I already described, running out a decade at least, probably more. And there's a lot of opportunity there in areas that are complementary to the electron-ion collider. Theory and computation is essential to support those goals. Obviously, that continues and playing a very significant role. The electron-ion collider will be a major focus at Jefferson Lab. And that's going to involve EIC construction project scope and responsibilities. And then beyond that, engagement, even leadership in the electron-ion collider scientific program, which, obviously elements of which are a significant outgrowth of the electron scattering program based at Jefferson Lab. Technology development will continue to be a key area, clearly. And then finally, this last panel, this is a very interesting one. Diversification of our scientific mission. We have a lot to offer in terms of expertise that we're confident could benefit other DOE Office of Science programs. And I could just tell you that we're exploring that potential in pretty close coordination with Office of Science. There isn't a whole lot I can say about that at the moment, except to say that there's some exciting opportunities out there that we are pursuing. So let me close with just a quick summary of my perspective. The lab is in a very healthy situation and position. It's in a strong position moving forward. Our priorities are very clear. We want to ensure that the 12JEV program is successful. We're committed to moving EIC forward aggressively in partnership with Brookhaven. We are exploring potential areas of scientific diversification that hopefully I'll be able to speak more about in the future. What I'd ask all of you is to keep in mind the competitive environment in which we operate. Please keep up the good work. Proceed with an appropriate sense of urgency in analyzing and disseminating scientific results from CBAF. Finally, let your voice be heard. Decision makers need to hear from you about the importance of your work, the importance of Jefferson Lab toward training the next generation, and the importance of the lab in achieving your goals. So thanks very much for your continued enthusiasm and support for the lab and its future. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you, Stuart, for that presentation. There is unfortunately not a great way for us to, follow with the usual applause or something like that. Perhaps a feature they can add to Blue Jeans events later. We could have a button we could all push or something. I find this always unnerving to complete a talk online for this reason. But there are a couple of questions that have come in. Maybe we'll pick up a few more along the way.
Yeah, I can read these. You want me to go for them, Ken?
Yeah, I'll just point out that Brad's actually online, so he can even, to give us a semblance of normality, can read his. But perhaps we should start with Sebastian's, which came in first there.
Okay. Yeah, MedCon 4. So Sebastian's is, what's the best guess for beginning MedCon 4 before restart of the physics run? So not necessarily. We're not necessarily tying MedCon 4 to the physics run, they will each proceed at their own rhythm and pace. MedCon 4, it's very difficult to say. Now, on the positive, the Commonwealth of Virginia is going to is in phase 2, which is one element of that. So, that's one threshold we had to cross. But, I guess I want to make the point that I don't see there's not an enormous difference in the way we're going to do things in MedCon 5 or 4. I think from the point of view of the experimental run, if users are needed to come on site in MedCon 5, we have processes for that, and we can do it. Obviously, MedCon 4 is more wide open. But even in MedCon 4, we're going to have about half of the Jefferson Lab workforce continuing to work remotely. So what it really does for us is it we'll call back another 150 or 200 employees to be on site. So anyway, long answer saying we don't know the precise timing, and that we believe we can get the work done in MedCon 5 with the flexibility we've built into the plan. Brad's question is about more details on beam operation.
Sorry, Stuart. Could I just follow up since we're on this MedCon issue? Maybe I lost the thread a bit about what happens next, but at what point or what is it called when operations are returning to normal and we have on-site meetings again and so on?
Yeah, well, in MedCon 4, we can start having some of those things return to normal, but there will still be social distancing and limits on how many people per square feet and things like that. MedCon 3 is when we're getting back to more what we used to think of now as normal life. So that okay. That's a ways out.
And MedCon 4, are users able to choose when to come in and work in
MedCon
offices?
4, yes, users are able to access the site. There is a there's a new process, a different process. So users will have to do a health check the same way employees do. Users who have been on international travel or even commercial airline travel will have to answer a questionnaire about that, and so on and so forth. Same way staff do in that condition.
Okay, thank you for going through that. So, Brad, should we hear your question? Are you online as a participant? I thought you were. Oh, I
yes,
suppose not.
Read it.
Okay, Stuart, yeah, go ahead and read it.
Yeah, I'll just read it. So he's asking about more details on beam operations, when ops will restart this summer, how the long-term schedule will be impacted, what's the best guess at what production would restart after the 2K cold box. So you're going to hear all this shortly from other speakers. The broad brush is we start restoring we start restoration in early July. Restoration is going to take a couple of weeks. So we're looking at physics running starting in late July, add 6 weeks of physics running to that. That takes us to early-ish September when we would shut down, start the long shutdown period there that takes us into the spring, and at which time we turn back on for the FY21 run. So, that's it in words. You're going to see more details on that a little bit later.
Okay. Spring 21. Actually, I thought that was a little earlier than I was expecting. Okay. So I was especially interested in the portion of your slides that were discussing the future of the lab, because I think your vision of the 4 pillars and so on. I'll just point out that you sort of accelerated going through the last of the 4 pillars because less is known as you get more in the future. Perhaps you have less to say, but I couldn't help but notice that the diversification pillar had a photograph of computer racks. So there's recently the introduction, as you mentioned, of the computational sciences and tech. How is it called? Division. Is that correct? Is that the right word?
Yep.
Could you say a little bit more about that in the future, or what you know about that, or could see that in the future?
So, I think everyone is aware of the tremendous investment that's been made across the whole DOE complex in, all topics around computation, high performance computation itself, artificial intelligence, quantum information, data sciences. So, just speaking generally, it's a growth area, right? And every lab is positioning themselves for growth in that area, and we are doing the same. So, yeah, I mean, you're right to recognize that is kind of an obvious area of growth, and that's even right here at home within the nuclear physics program, right? So NP has a artificial intelligence program that had a call for proposals recently, as well as quantum information program with calls for proposals. So those are sort of obvious areas, like many places that we're really trying to ramp up our activities and expertise and engagement in. Maybe that serves as a platform upon which to grow. So we'll see.
Okay, thank you. Well, if we don't have any other questions,
There is another
I guess
question.
Oh, please go ahead, Bill.
No, it's posted in the Q&A.
Oh, I missed it. Okay, thank you.
Oh, can I comment on the administration's student visa ban directed at Chinese grad students and collaborators? Do we know how it will be implemented? No, we do not yet know how it will be implemented. The wording in that is there's some wording in there that's very fuzzy, and we're collectively across the lab system trying to understand what it means and what the impact will be. So that's really all I can say on that.
So beyond that one problem with visas, there are multiple problems. I'm sure you're aware of, for example, the announcement that's expected soon regarding H-1Bs, the discussion about the OPT. So there are a lot of, and also the delays we've seen. I think we'll mention all of this later at the business meeting, as we can try to follow it from the board. But I mean, how does this affect directly employees at the lab, or how do you see trying to help the user community, maintain their productivity in the field as these problems come up, barriers come up?
Yeah, this is right. Yeah, this is it's a serious issue. It affects the lab staff directly, and together, combined with the pandemic, it has made it sort of doubly difficult. We lost senior hire, frankly, who was unable to come because of the travel ban, and then just eventually gave up. Someone we were trying to attract from Europe, and there are others in similarly difficult positions. So I can say our HR department is kept very busy with all this stuff, trying to interpret it, because it's one thing to read about in the newspaper, and it's another to actually see the letter of the law and then try to implement it. So it's pretty complex and seemingly evolving, on a weekly to monthly basis. So it's a real issue. It's a real problem. It's a significant issue for the user community, for S&T in the United States. We go to the trouble in terms of educating students, and we have invested and would love to have those students stay in the United States and contribute in academia or industry or nationals or wherever. And also, we want to be able to hire the best, from around the whole world, draw upon the entire world's population in particular areas. So, it's frustrating. We're frustrated just like all of you are.
Thanks. I'll mention, I think, again, this is something that we'll mention later in the business meeting, but this is something we've tried to communicate about. We appreciate, the open communication on that. It's not like there's something that we've been able to solve, of course.
Yeah.
It's not really, but at least it's worth discussing to see if there's ways that we can't, share information, at least find out what's going on, maybe predict what's going to happen next if we can. I guess this is it. No other questions coming in? Then perhaps we will move over and hear from Tim, who can start us about.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
Let me see if I can successfully share my screen.
All right. We succeeded before.
All right, can we reproduce it? Can you see my talk?
No, not yet. You're not showing yet as sharing your screen. So perhaps if did you find the image there on the right? The icon for this? Okay, now I'm getting a signal that you are started to share it. It's not coming up yet, but we are noting that you are trying to share it. Strange that it's not showing up yet.
Nothing yet?
Nothing yet. It does say that you are sharing, but I don't know why it's not.
It's showing on my.
Any idea here, Lorelei? Do we need to? Yeah.
It says, I see that he's sharing, it's just not popping up.
So Stuart is no longer sharing, so it should be not a particular overlap.
Tim, can you turn it off and turn it back on just to see if that jolts it awake?
Sharing?
Yes.
Says I'm sharing screen, so let me stop sharing. Now I've stopped sharing. Now I've started sharing
again,
and I'm full screen.
And you don't have two screens, is that correct?
Right, just one. At the top it says Blue Jeans Events is sharing undefined. And then I have stop sharing button, which I'm not, and then I have a hide button.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and try to start sharing myself. We'll see if it's successful with that. If so, perhaps we can use your PDF that I have. And if not, we have a larger problem to deal with. This is not an expected functionality. So.
Right. Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, yeah, I don't know what to talk about it. Are we able to see my screen now? Because it definitely says I'm sharing.
No, can't see yours either, Ken.
Great.
I see it, Ken.
There we go.
Yeah.
for you to do?
There it is.
Okay, so it's just a time lag.
So we're
So we just work this way, Tim?
sure. So you're going to advance it for me?
I think that's what we'll have to do, unless you want to give your screen share one more try.
No, that's okay. We can do it this way.
All right.
Beds are nothing if not adaptive. So, yeah, thanks to everybody for some time to share some perspectives from DOE nuclear physics. Next slide, too, please. So this, I don't have to tell everyone on this call, I'm sure this has been a very interesting time, and a lot of important things have been happening in addition to the pandemic. We had the FY 2020 appropriation in December of last year. Critical Decision 0 for the EIC, a very major step forward for our field. Stuart did a very nice job of discussing the site selection and the follow-up to that. I'll say a few more words about that, but that was January 2020. Then in February of 2020, as happens most years, we had the FY 2021 President's Request. I'll say some words about that. I'll say a bit about the COVID-19 decampment at headquarters. And then there's also been a reorganization within the Office of Science. I think the impact on the field generally in nuclear physics is probably minimal, but I'll also say a few words about that. Next screen, please. So jumping right in, we all know that in order to carry through on a mission such as the one we have, it takes resources. This shows you our FY 2020 budget as appropriated. And I'm not going to try to make a big analysis, but I did want to make a few points. If you look at the bottom where it says total nuclear physics, you'll see that last year, 19, we were operating with 690 million. This year, we're operating with 713 million. That doesn't tell you the entire story because there's roll-off from the FRIB construction. There's also increase for FRIB operations, so pluses and minuses there. You see the language we got from the House and Senate below, that we should devote 28.5 million for FRIB operations. So that's on the way up. It also directed that we should have optimal funding for operations and major items of equipment. And that language is important because it has implications for research. And a TEC start for the EIC of $1 million, which is a remarkable turn of events that the EIC is already beginning a construction project, which is spectacular news for the field, I would say. And 12 million for the first year of funding for the Stable Isotope Production and Research Center, SIPRC, which is an initiative of the isotope program. Now, I'll say more in a little bit, but one of the things that's happening with the reorg in SC is that the isotope program is going to separate out from the nuclear science program. And so the lines that have been highlighted there in gold or yellow are the ones that belong to the isotope program. So in a future budget, you would not see those in the NP budget. And if you just look quickly, that means that, for example, if it were this year, the budget line for NP would be about $60 million less. So you may see in the future the number go down substantially. It doesn't mean necessarily that that's a cut to NP. It may be at least in part due to the separation of the isotope program. And the only other point I'd make about this slide is the numbers that are in italics are sub amounts of the larger budget right above them. So for example, if you look at medium energy, the overall budget is 189 million. The number just under that for TJ-NAF Ops, which is in italics, is included in that top level number, so they're not additive. Next slide, please. So from a high level view, things look very good. We're continuing to do world leading research at state-of-the-art national user facilities, either in operation or anticipated to begin operation soon. And you see FRIB, RIC, JLab, and Atlas there. So we're working very hard on achieving the vision the field had in 2015. EIC is beginning construction, a major new tool for the field, a fantastic beginning. And FRIB construction continues to roll along on schedule and on budget. And so that all is good. We're also pursuing pioneering experiments, such as neutrinoless double beta decay, you see in the lower left, and exploring ways that we can contribute to cross-cutting priorities such as quantum information science. And you see the report that was done by NSAC there about QIS/QC opportunities in nuclear physics, which is a very important sort of watershed kind of document. So from that perspective, things look pretty good. Next slide, please. If you zoom in a little bit closer, things are still good, but there are issues. So, for example, the 2020 appropriation provides both for exciting new prospects, but also significant challenges. And you heard me say earlier that there was direction that, for example, facility ops and new MIE should be optimally funded. You know, those are constraints that are placed on us when we figure out how to implement the budget that we're given. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because the upshot is when you take care of those things as directed, the remaining budget for research takes a hit. So in this fiscal year, the reduction for research is about 5.5%. So my program managers all went to work and did a marvelous job, basically pulling hat tricks of various sorts to ensure that we mitigated that 5.5% reduction to the fullest extent possible. I'm not aware, no one's told me of, you know, a research group where, for example, they had to let somebody go because of that particular reduction. But there has been an impact, and we'll say more about this in a little bit, but the impact is loss of flexibility to fund new proposals and a concern about the continuing trend, which tends to erode support for core research. And so I think those are things which I feel concerned about. Next slide, please. So just as a general high-level view of where we are on our report card for the 2015 long-range plan, I would say for 3 of the 4 top-level recommendations, I would be comfortable putting a check mark there, which doesn't mean that, you know, everything's done, but it means they're substantially complete at the level that one would consider, if those were the only recommendations, sort of moving on to the next long-range plan and charting that vision. But you'll see there's one there where the button still needs to be clicked. And so I think one of the high priorities for our office in the next little while is making the kind of progress on double beta decay that would allow us to click that button as well. But we continue to work hard to continue to execute on the 2015 long-range plan vision. Next slide, please. So that was mentioned and summarized by Stuart very nicely. A decision was made that after quite a bit of presentation and preparation and consideration that the EIC would be sited at Brookhaven, but following that, our office wanted to make very clear, and Stuart even sort of showed you this language, was a prime directive of our office and the DOE Office of Science, as this project was to be carried out as a full intellectual partnership between Brookhaven and JLab teams and other collaborators who might want to join and contribute, with major participation by all. And so we wanted to reinforce in no uncertain terms that the way this will be carried out involves everybody, as it says, in a full intellectual partnership. And I'm very pleased to say that is what is happening. There are weekly calls of our office with the EIC team, Brookhaven, JLab, and our office, and tremendous progress is being made, as Stuart outlined, in terms of figuring out how the project should be carried out, figuring out who's going to do what, and getting this all lined up so that we can really get going on this construction in earnest. You see that the TPC currently is 1.6 billion to 2.6 billion, and we envision the completion of this, around the end of the decade or just slightly after that. That, of course, very much depends on what the Congress does and the resources they give us to work with. Over the course of the construction project, not immediately, some funding that would have gone towards things like upgrades of RIC detectors would be redirected, and levels of effort that would be associated with that would be redirected to the EIC. So we think that over the course of the project, we can reprioritize funds in the range you see there, and that can also help reduce the amount of new money that's needed to implement the EIC. And there's budget profiles that have been worked that show that, even with realistic caps on the amount of funding, per year, funding is always tight and always an issue. The EIC can still be implemented successfully in a timely manner. So, this is teed up for a success. It's sort of the ball is in our court now, us collectively, the agency, the community, the laboratory managements, to really sort of make it happen, and very good progress is being made on that. Next slide, please. I just want to make a very quick comment about the National Academy. You see some of the language that they came to in their consideration of the science of the EIC. And, it has great importance not only for the science it will accomplish, which is world leading, but also as a focus for accelerator science and technology. And, these days, many of our institutions that we sort of are used to in Washington, including the National Academy, are getting a fresh look in how they operate. I just wanted to emphasize that I think that, having the ability to do an independent study by a panel of experts was really crucial in terms of our getting this project accepted. So I think that's really was an important thing. Next slide, please. So here we have the budget for FY21. This is the one that's currently in the hands of the House and the Senate appropriations staff. And I've highlighted the line for nuclear physics. If you look at that line, you'll see that what's proposed for nuclear physics in FY21 is 653, which is a reduction of something of order $60 million, or 8.4%. That actually doesn't tell the whole story, because within the FY21 budget, the isotope program is still embedded in this budget. And because isotopes are quite rightly a very high priority for the nation, there are increases in that line, in that number, for the isotope program. So the actual impact of this budget on nuclear physics is somewhat greater than you might suspect just by looking at that number. Next slide, please. This gives a breakdown in the various areas, and I'm not going to attempt to sort of go through in great detail. The highlighted area is, again, the part that will eventually be separated out from the isotope program. But I think the main point of this is that, if the president's request is accepted, of course, there will be impacts that we will have to take into account. And if you look at those major lines like medium energy research, heavy ion research, low energy research, you'll see they're all basically reduced by about 14, 15%. So this would, of course, be a very big impact we would have to work with to try and figure out how best to continue to support the highest priority research and nevertheless meet the challenges of that budget. Next slide, please. And these are some of the differences from 20 to 21. And again, I'm not going to go through in detail, but the first, I'll hit just a few of the big things. The first, but these will be in the slides so you can look at it. The first one there, core research would be reduced, and you see those are pretty substantial reductions. Let's see, next slide, please. If you look at the first category there, facility ops, you'll see that the amount of running time is also reduced substantially at the major facilities. FRIB ops, which is planned to go to something like 60 million in that year, would instead be maintained at 25.6. You can see down the bottom there are construction projects with amounts that really don't allow for the kind of progress that we're planning on. So, and I think, the sense of these slides is not for you to panic, and I'll say a word about that in a moment, but for you to be aware. The marks we expect to happen in the June-July timeframe. We have some indication that we may get the first mark from the House even later this week, but we'll see. But it underscores something Stuart said earlier, that there's a continuing need for us all to articulate the value of what we do to the nation, how we contribute to the competitiveness of the nation economically, the safety and security of the nation, in addition to just advancing knowledge, which is also very important. So, we need to continue to do that. The people who appropriate dollars hear about lots of very important things, and they hear about competing priorities. And that message from nuclear science has to be loud and clear as well. Next slide, please. So should you throw up your hands? No. This is similar to the experience with the last three appropriations. There's been for quite some time a very big uncertainty. Hopefully that uncertainty will decrease once we have the House marks and the Senate mark, because they give an indication of what the Congress feels is appropriate, and that's a very important data point. Our job is to stay focused and continue to deliver on the important outcomes that have gotten to us to this current state of progress today. And so we need to continue to deliver exciting discoveries, important scientific knowledge, technological advances, and workforce training. And that's what we've been doing that brought us here, and we need to continue it. And we need to, in a word, keep up the good work. Next slide. And I'm very happy to say that that's exactly what you folks in the field and we in the office are focused on. One of the important initiatives at Brookhaven going forward is going to be Mahler. I think this is an exceptionally important experiment. I place it alongside G-2 in terms of its potential for flagging new physics. We know exactly, the theory is very clean. We know exactly how much parity violation there should be from interference between the photon and Z-poles. If we see more parity violation than that, it's a clear indication there's another loop for another particle or particles that we're currently unaware of. And so I think this could be a very important milestone experiment to sort of help us understand where the new physics is. Next slide, please. Of course, the other excitement is that the 12 JEV science program is well underway. This is a result from Hall D, which somehow on your screen, Kent, has gotten rotated by, I don't know, I think 180 degrees. Or it's actually gotten reversed or something. It did something completely weird. But in any event, the important part is there's brand new data on photo production of Jape Psi, which, all these years we've known the Jape Psi, we still don't really understand how it's produced. And that's going to be illuminated by the experimentation on Hall D, for example, along with a lot of other groundbreaking research in the 12 JEV CBAF. And also these results provide some constraints on the structure of the LHCb pentaquark favoring a molecular description, a very interesting question. So in a word, there's a great program underway at CBAF, and that is just as exciting as anything else. Next slide, please. At FRIB, just very quickly, that project continues to roll along on cost, on schedule. They're more than 93% complete, and we fully expect they will complete right on time. Currently, they have 5 months of schedule float left. They used up one for the COVID-19, but both the cost and schedule impacts of COVID-19 are well within their contingency. So that's going extremely well. Next project, the next slide, please. The tools that are going to be needed at FRIB are also well along. So Greta,
Tim,
yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm getting a note from our moderator that she has no live feed. I want to know, do other people have live feed?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe a local problem. I apologize for the interruption, Tim. Let's go back to our regularly scheduled programming.
No problem. We can get rid of the toolbar there. Yeah, great. So, yeah, just in a word, we're tooling up for, a robust research program, including the Theory Alliance. As I've said before, theory and experiment, they really have to be a tango for a really productive program, and they're tooling up for that. And for, world-class gamma measurements with Greta, and to take full advantage of the neutron-rich nuclei to understand nucleosynthesis and the R process. They're beginning to get going on the high-rigidity spectrometer. Next slide, please. Of course, the Argon Tandem LINEC accelerator system continues as our premier stable beam facility. In the interest of time, I won't say a lot, except that they're planning a multi-user upgrade to be able to take much better advantage of their duty factor and be able to run stable and unstable beams at the same time for a suite of users all at once. Next slide, please. At Brookhaven, we just heard yesterday that they are back on the air and taking data to search for a critical point in the phase diagram of nuclear matter. So much like Jefferson Lab, which is tooling up to begin where they left off, Brookhaven is doing the same. And so very glad to see that they're back on the air. And the fact that they came up so shortly after the lab began operations again is a real testament to people's dedication and expertise. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned at the top, we're really pursuing with vigor a double beta decay experiment. This has the potential, depending on what's observed ultimately, to be a groundbreaking, well, earth-shattering, I should say, results. You're not only trying to understand whether the neutrino is its own antiparticle, but also by the seesaw mechanism, whether, for example, there's a heavy right-handed neutrino, how the neutrino mass we see today is so small, how the forces condensed out of the early universe. So a very important experiment. Next slide, please. We do have cross-cutting research initiatives in the Office of Science. There seems to be a group of these that sort of pop up every year. These are ones from 2019 in which our researchers have made significant investments. Machine learning and artificial intelligence, which I'll say a little bit more about in a moment. Quantum information science, exascale computing, microelectronics innovation, national isotope strategy, and then biosecurity and U.S. fusion. I would comment that in machine learning and quantum information science, for example, there's investment being made, not only cross-cutting investment, investments across all 5 programs. For example, the current funding opportunity announcement for quantum information science centers, which cuts across all 5 SC programs. But there's also, inside NP, there's also investment being made, since we have funding lines specific to NP for both quantum information science and hopefully in FY21 machine learning and artificial intelligence as well. So these are very active areas of investigation, and they're considered rather essential to keep the United States where it needs to be in world leadership in these areas. Next slide, please. And can we get rid of the...
Yeah, I lost it here for a moment.
Now we're in
the wrong slide here. There we go. Thank you.
We're looking at languages, which is one of my favorite particles, but having to do with my thesis. So, yeah, I would just comment, and somewhat in the spirit of what Stuart said earlier, from NP office point of view, I think it's very exciting to see Jefferson Lab on the move in the sense of, opening up new frontiers, positioning itself to be a much more substantial player, for example, in the kinds of initiatives we were just talking about. So there was a very nice workshop on artificial intelligence, sort of led by Amber Bonling. You've heard now about the announcement of the creation of a new computational science division. You may or may not have heard that in the fall, in November, there will be a joint Office of Science NIH workshop hosted at Jefferson Lab, and Cynthia Keppel is sort of the lead on putting that together for us in the lab. And there's already been one cross-cutting funding opportunity announcement lab call for artificial intelligence. That wasn't an NP-specific one, but it was one that NP participated in. So, things are happening, both at the agency level and at the lab level. And, I think it's quite exciting. Next slide, please. These, just for your information, are the latest Office of Science graduate student research applications, awardees, I should say. And so, if you are a professor and you have graduate students, this is a program you might want to take a look at. I think a number of people are discovering this, even though it's been around a while, discovering it for the first time. And it can be quite helpful in terms of helping to support a graduate research experience at a national lab. You see in this particular cohort, there are 2, Casey Morgan and John Boyd, who will be doing a research experience at Jefferson Lab. So this is a good program, and you should take a look. Sharon Stevenson is the program manager in charge. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Very quickly, there's a few changes in the Office of Science. One thing we didn't have before that we do have now is a principal deputy director. It's Steve Binkley, who was the acting director prior to the arrival of Chris Fall. You'll see that the deputy for science programs is now Harriet Kung. And you see the standard programs there. Next slide, please. One of the changes, which I alluded to earlier, is that under the principal deputy director, you now see 3 boxes in the middle there. One is for isotopes, one's an accelerator initiative, and the other one is SBIR, STTR. So the line to the director for those programs now goes through the principal deputy director, Steve Binkley. As a practical matter, I would just comment that the deputy for science programs is also reporting to the director through Steve Binkley. So that previous slide, I think, was not entirely accurate the way that the reporting goes up to the director. Next slide, please. Trying to go reasonably quickly. There was a decampment in March. I think in the interest of time, this will be, you can read it. You're sort of all aware of it. I think the important part here is the 5th bullet there. And basically, we've worked very hard to make sure that we had continuity of everything that's important to you in the field. So still making awards, still doing reviews, having lab manager budget briefings, weekly EIC meetings, 2 division meetings a week, 1 for each division, all hands meetings, and we had our office retreat. So the first order, I would not say that nothing is lost because we've been teleworking, but the first order, I think we've been fully functional. And the labs at this HQ and the labs at this point are both either in or about to be in phase 2, and the labs are restarting operations after getting approval to do so. Next slide, please. There's some new faces in our office, and you see the list here. In the interest of time, I won't read through all of those. One very important thing that happened is Jim Hawkins has retired. Many of you know him from his efforts on project management. We're actively recruiting someone for that post now and hope to have one soon. Guidance for our solicitations is being updated. One of the things that you'll see that's a change is that we will be prioritizing research over what I call outsized summer salary. Some summer salaries have gotten so sizable at this point that a couple of months of summer salary are almost more than a reasonable sized grant. So we're trying to deal with that in the interest of young researchers and getting research accomplished. Manashir Farkanda is our POC at the moment for artificial intelligence, and Gulshan Ray is the POC for QIS and QC. Although Gulshan maintains a very large interest in artificial intelligence as well. Next slide. Getting some very interesting sound effects.
Have they stopped? Are you seeing slide 29?
Oh, yeah, I am. Thank you. I didn't see it change. I'll skip through this again in the interest of time. One thing we wanted to thank someone for is Tanya Horn. She was our representative on a joint all SC program FACA exercise to look at opportunities in nuclear science related to artificial intelligence and machine learning. She did a great job on that. Let's see, among these other things, I think I've pretty much covered everything. I'll just hit the bullet at the bottom. There's a new program in the Office of Science for to select each year some deserving people from the labs to get awards as distinguished scientists. And so the last cohort of distinguished scientists was announced a while ago, and in case you weren't aware of it, Barbara Yatzak from LBNL was selected in the first cohort. So we're very pleased about that. Next slide, please. We continue to be extremely focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's actually an Office of Science working group that's been studying for about 6 months how in the office we can do a better job in our processes. They're about to come out with, I believe it's 15 recommendations on things that we can do in the office to improve diversity, equity, inclusion. You'll see that posted, and so this continues to be very, very important priority for the Office of Science. Next slide, please. So sort of the high-level assessment, I think the program has approval to build a suite of new tools, big and small, which if successfully constructed promises discoveries and world-leading science, quote unquote, as far as the eye can see. One thing that I didn't mention, but I'll mention now, is SOLID. We haven't concluded what exact date we'll have for the SOLID science review, but we have received the proposal, and we're aware that we want to have such a review. And the time frame I'm thinking about is early in 2021, but we will try and nail that down and let people know. There's a host of exciting new initiatives being opened up. Nuclear physics is able to produce a significant participation in a number of those. I am concerned about erosion of resources for core research. But thus far, the community is staying resilient and focused, continuing to deliver on important outcomes for the nation. And I guess the final comment would be that I think the current situation with COVID-19 has some lessons for us, and we would be foolish if we didn't learn those lessons, so that if we have another instance of something like this, we will be better prepared next time to deal with it straight away. And final slide, next one. It's my standard slide, which I apologize for the fact that I keep reemphasizing, but I think it's important. Because in times of constrained resources, there can be a tendency to shoot inward, imagining that, if one other part of nuclear physics just had a little less funding, then, that might mean more for something else. And that's not how it works. Things that get decreased in funding, the most likely thing is that funding will go out of nuclear physics altogether. So I think, as the saying goes, a great tide floats all boats. We have to remain unified and support each other, support the value of nuclear physics, so that's the reason why we get the resources we do is apparent to our stakeholders in the Congress and in the American public. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions. Sorry I took a little over time.
No worries about the time. We did try to build a little extra in, although I know you need to leave pretty soon. There are a number of questions here. Unfortunately, because I was sharing the screen, it goes away, right, when I come up. Let's see if I can pull down to where that is.
C8 in the Q&A.
Yeah.
That may be cumulative.
I think some of those are directed at me, and other ones were from before. Yes, exactly. So Larry Cardman is asking, he's curious why the isotope program is being moved out of the Office of Nuclear Physics he wants to say that you've done an outstanding job running it, and the synergy between basic and isotope research programs has been very helpful. So do you have a comment on why that's reorganized, since it seems to have been going well?
Yeah, I think it's not being moved out because of anything bad that happened. I agree with Larry. I think it's been going very well. I think to some extent it's just the vision of the director that this might work better. Because a lot of what it does has to do with production of isotopes, even though the research component of that program has been exceptionally important. But maybe the most intuitive reason for me, and the one that Joanne cites, Joanne Gillow, who's the head, is that the isotope program has really grown and been such an enormous success that it now couples to many other offices in the federal complex. To the FBI, to to NIH, probably too many to count. And so in some sense, it's appropriate that it sort of rises to the visibility of a standalone DOE program just because it's been so successful and made so many strong connections to other federal programs. So I think for me, that's the most intuitive thing. But all said, it's not as though there's some umbilica that's being cut forever and always. We're going to continue to be, synergistic, if not symbiotic. I think we're going to continue to sort of work pretty closely and coordinate pretty closely. And so I think a lot of the values that have built up when it was hosted by NP will continue, but it will be its own program now with its own visibility. And so, I think that's appropriate given its current stature.
Okay. Thanks. I want to move on to another question. Nalanga asks about there are a couple of questions about the effect, perhaps if we can look ahead, of COVID on future budget. And a couple of ways to take it. One of the ways that Nalanga is asking about here is, given that there's been such a delay in some of the research project and in affecting postdocs and PhD students completing their work and so on, to wonder if there's any sort of supplementary funding that might be available or might come available to university groups to kind of get through some of these shortfalls and carry through people through some of these barriers.
Yeah, it's a good question. There is an attempt by the Office of Science to quantify what those impacts are. Up to now, it's mostly focused on projects and MIEs, perhaps lab operations, but it is turning toward a focus more towards research and what the impacts have been on that. And so there's an Office of Science working group that's looking at that. And Sharon Stevenson is our point of contact. I imagine she will be joining the other NP program managers to try and get that information. So I think to the extent the impacts can be quantified in dollars, it could be very helpful. There have been, certainly there's been consideration by the appropriators that this may be an area that needs some help. There's nothing I can report, concretely at the moment. There have been appropriations of money that have gone to COVID-related research, but thus far nothing that's gone to addressing the impacts of COVID on research. But as I say, it's being considered now. So you can either proactively contact Sharon and let her know about issues you might have, or you'll probably be contacted by one of the program managers to ask for the same information.
Yeah, I was going to follow on to ask if we should try to tabulate that as users try to tabulate what sort of needs we might have in regard and pass it to.
I would think that would be very helpful if you could.
And pass it directly to Sharon or to the program manager?
You can pass it to either one or even to me. But if you can somehow tabulate and integrate it and give us a sort of number that tells us what the impact has been and what specifically has been impacted, because we're going to have to, to be successful, it's going to have to be documented and justified and defended. So, there should be real items that are enumerated on, what those impacts are and why they require additional resources.
So that's some homework then for university groups listening here. That if we can put that together, it'd be a useful thing to feed back to DOE.
Right.
There was a question come in from Florian. Unfortunately, if I'm not looking at the last name, I forget how to say it. I'm sorry. But Florian asks if you can comment. I'm sorry, no, I'm reading the wrong one. Like that was already asked. It was Alexander Kamson that I wanted to go to next. He was asking about this QIS FOA. He just wanted to know what the timescale was for turning that back around.
The one on the quantum information science centers, or the one that's specific to NP? I can answer both. The one that's for the quantum information science centers, the Office of Science is in the process now of some reverse site visits by some of the applicants, and so I think the hope is to make some awards reasonably soon. I can't give you an exact date, but certainly those monies are intended to be put out this fiscal year, and this fiscal year ends September 30. So, and we're for all intents and purposes we're in July, so it gives you some indication of when those announcements will be made. And in the Office of Science, in the Office of Nuclear Physics, Gulshan Ray is about to make a number of awards based on the 2019 FOA. So those are about to come out any time now. So it's been a bit of a delay for a variety of reasons. One of the most significant challenges is that the group of people in the world who are knowledgeable about quantum information science and can serve as reviewers is highly sought after by all kinds of people, and so they're basically totally oversubscribed. So just getting together reviewers has been a challenge in this case, much more than it usually is. So in any event, his awards will be coming out soon.
Okay, excellent. I wanted to get your comment on one other thing. You heard the discussion about visas that we had with Stuart a minute ago. This is something that we're concerned about in the user community because obviously it affects a large fraction of the community, and if we lose researchers, it slows down progress and so on. I don't know if you can comment on ways that we can get clarity on what the programs are or how they're coming, or any way to sort of smooth this information flow. Or in general on the problem.
I want to be a little bit careful because it's an active discussion, and so I don't want to be, putting out statements that are going to, come back to the agency as though somehow I'm pronouncing, how things are going to go, because it's an active discussion. But I think I can give some comments that may be a little reassuring. First of all, the first one's not reassuring. The first one is I am unaware of anything having to do with visas and the State Department. I'm happy to look into things, but my ability to do anything there is probably limited. But if there's particular problems, I'm always willing to wade in on to fight the good fight for a good cause. But coming back to closer to home, where I do know a bit more, there is some new guidance being considered by the Department of Energy that I think strengthens some guidance it put out earlier. but the intention is not to. The intention is really to try and understand the connections people may have to certain programs in China that were dual purpose, not just research, but intended for other things as well. And at least my understanding is it's not to present prohibitions. It's basically to fix some loopholes in the first document about reporting requirements. So, letting people know if a source of support was in one of these categories. And so I think the intent is not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We understand very well that, science is an international language, and that it's most productive when there's a free flow of ideas across international boundaries, because science doesn't sort of know international boundaries. And so, I think that's not lost for a second on any of the associate directors or the director of the Office of Science. And so, a lot of the discussion that's ongoing right now is to try and make sure that that part of it is preserved. So I wouldn't panic at this point, maybe, because I think there are people thinking about this carefully, and I think there's great focus on making sure that user facilities and user communities are not unduly impacted by whatever comes down the pipe next. So maybe I've already said too much, but I wanted to give some reassurance that this is not, at least as far as I understand, intended to be some draconian measure that's basically going to completely shut down the ability of people from any country to come and participate on research in the United States.
Thank you very much for that carefully calibrated statement, but the statement that there's attention on the issue, I think, is important for us to hear. So I appreciate you going into that as far as you could.
Yeah, one of the unfortunate parts of this is, and there may be parts of this that I don't even know about from other agencies like the State Department or something else. But as far as the DOE goes, it seems to me one of the important or unfortunate parts of this is that there's this chatter, if you will, in the user communities about this and how terrible it might be. And in the absence of specific language, people can imagine all kinds of things. And so it's unfortunate that that all got whipped up before the actual language was put out. And I think
right.
The unfortunate nature of that is recognized as well. But anyway, that's where we are.
Okay, thanks. There is another question in Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and suggest that we take it perhaps offline. If you have another moment, I don't know if you can see the Q&A to type in an answer, but I'm going to suggest we go to a break now. We're running well over time. I think, as I understand the schedule, we should have already been into Jim Thomas's talk. So
That's
lousy as any yeah. But this conversation was super useful, I think. I'm going to ask Jim if he doesn't mind, if we hold off a little bit longer, give people a few minutes so that they're able to grab their cup of coffee or whatever they need. I have 10:55 now, so could we start again at 11:05? Would that be all right?
Sounds good to me. Yeah, okay. Just fine.
Hopefully we don't have to tweak the schedule any further than just this delay. We can eat into the lunchtime period. So we'll restart the programming then at 11:05. I think this line will be open, but we'll turn off sound and video.